Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
There are many stories, real stories, not fictional stories, about teachers who send students away to do something. On one hand, it's an instruction to go spread the teachings. If a student studies and practices and has some capacity, has that capacity to help spread the teachings, then the teacher might say, well, go away and do that in some other place, and maybe even name a particular place very far away. Even, for instance, Patrul Rinpoche had a student for 50 years, and then he told the student to go away and go spread the teachings after 50 years of wandering with him. He really only had one primary disciple, this one student who went with him everywhere. And then maybe it wasn't after 50 years, but when the student was 50 years old, I think perhaps it was. It's been many, many decades, though. Swami Shivananda of Rishikesh had a habit of only working with people for a very short time and then sending them away to do that. So, for instance, Swami Radha, a Canadian student who had some dreams about Swami Shivananda when she was already in her 40s, and then went to Rishikesh and met him. And I think they exchanged some letters before she went also, and only was with him for 6 months before he said, go back to Canada and establish a school. And in doing this, when you read these stories, there's usually the person is being sent somewhere where they have no resources and maybe not even any networks. And you read these accounts, and the people who are sent away to do this are terrified. They really don't know how they're going to do what their teacher asked them to do. Plus, they've never taught before, so they're also scared about that. And most of them think, I'm not ready, even though I've been told I'm ready. So there's a lot of fear and uncertainty and wondering, how am I going to accomplish this? Sometimes people who were monastics were sent away, and they literally had no money. The teacher gave them enough money for a train ticket, and that was it. And they land somewhere with no money at all. So this journey into the relative unknown, with not really a sense of what the plan should be or the future should hold, with a feeling of difficulty of some sort or another, and maybe fear and trepidation, and this encounter with the unknown, and with feeling charged with carrying out the orders of one's teacher. So it's a great responsibility. It's a great burden. It's a great honor, but it is a difficulty, right? To be told to do something that seems very, very difficult, and where you're carrying the burden of the teachings, being asked to give the teaching. Whenever we're doing practice, the more we are asked to do things that are somewhat beyond what we think we're able to do, or to not do things in some cases. But the more we are asked to do things that are difficult, that lead us into encounters with the unknown, that are unfamiliar, and also just on a more ordinary level, even for people who are not going to be teachers, to be asked to do things we actually don't want to do. These are all signs of accomplishment. When you are a baby practitioner, or maybe you're just someone who's interested but not all that interested, or maybe you're someone who is quite fragile in some way and needs to take a very, very slow path. When you're in that condition, you aren't asked to do things like this, right? You aren't asked to do things that you absolutely don't want to do, or things that are very, very difficult, or things with a great amount of responsibility. There's a wonderful line in the Joey where it's talking about, the freedom of having less responsibility. But in terms of spiritual life, that freedom of having less responsibility is, at least in the beginning, an indication that the less responsibility is all you're able to bear. And as you go along and you have more contact with wisdom and you have more to share with others and possibly being of more benefit, you get more responsibility. The first line of that responsibility is responsibility to your own sadhana. So not responsibility to teaching necessarily. I just started with that example because I followed instructions to come here, and it's been very, very difficult for me personally. But I also recognize that in doing so, regardless of what happens, this is the sadhana that I've been asked to do. This is the responsibility that I've been given. So from my perspective, I'm not going to try to change that. Right? I'm just going to try to be with it and see where it goes and do my best. From the perspective of maybe not teaching, this feeling that you're being asked to do things you don't want to do or that are just very, very difficult should be seen as rewards, Now, you have to use your discernment, of course, because, for instance, a friend of our community was in a monastery in the United States for a bunch of years with a teacher who just kind of was a jerk, and yelled at people a lot and just treated people badly. And for a long time, because he'd been hearing these kinds of teachings, he thought, oh, this is what I need. This is good for me. So we still have to use our discernment. But once we find the teacher and the tradition that we want to follow, the Vidya Shakti, the stream of wisdom that we want to follow, and if we are doing so diligently, then difficulties, and particularly difficulties that challenge our normal karmic predilections, our normal karmic desires, should be seen as rewards. It's almost like a stamp of good job. And this doesn't mean that all spiritual life is just a series of horrible things we don't want to do, that we should see as a stamp of good job. I mean, that's not true at all. For instance, my experience coming to California, at the same time that there's a lot of things about it that are unknown, uncomfortable, things I feel a grave responsibility for various reasons. That's a burden in some ways. And on other levels, I see that some of my own samskaras are really like being excavated. My own minute-to-minute experience and my experience in practice has just really deepened through all of this. So the difficulties are happening at the same time that I'm having this other experience of being much more immersed in presence and more in contact with God more of the time. Baiji Ma's, one of Ma's principal disciples, as you know, was asked to do many things he didn't want to do. Guru Priya Devi was asked to do many things she didn't want to do. I got the impression, although I wouldn't put money on this, but just from reading her diaries, she came to Ma when she was 13. She begged her parents to let her stay with Ma. At first they said no, of course. This is the saga of the female who wants to devote their lives to spirituality a lot of the times. Of course, Guru Priya Devi was from a middle-class family. There's also the famous stories of Mandarava and Yeshid Sogal, who were both princesses in Tibet, who wanted to run off with this weirdo Padmasambhava and give up their whole royal thing. So that was another obstacle that had to be gotten over, but they usually prevail. In any case, Guru Priya Devi prevailed, and she stayed with Ma from being when she was a teenager until she died. I think she was with Ma for 50 years at least. And I get the impression from reading her diaries that she actually didn't really like to do practice. She was much more of a service-oriented person. And I got the impression that like sitting on a cushion was really not her thing. And yet, Ma ordered her to go away for a year with some other devotee and do nothing but seated practice. She complained bitterly about this in her diaries. She did not want to do it. Right? But she did it anyway. Baiji said one time to Ma, I've read this quote to you at other satsangs. He said to Ma, I've been practicing and I've been with you for so many decades, and I haven't accomplished very much. That was his feeling in his despair of that moment. And she said, don't worry about it. Just put your hand in mine like a trusting little child. And when we are being practitioners, when we're not being something else, when we are being practitioners, that's how we have to relate to life circumstances, as difficult or not, but as wisdom showing up in that form, and we just put our hand in it trustingly like a little child, with the understanding that we just do our best to work with it as practitioners, and that whatever results will be the best thing for us, even if we work with it clumsily, right? Because again, clumsy or elegant doesn't really matter. What matters is sincerity. That is what matters. Sincerity of effort. How lurchy you are or how glidey you are doesn't matter. If you're honest, if you don't lie to yourself or to anybody else, if you do your best when you feel separate to get back to feeling unity, if you follow the instructions you've been given as best as you can interpret them, because we get instructions from lots of places. Once we get to a certain level of practice, we're not only hearing our teacher, we're hearing our guru in lots of different things. So we're doing our best to follow, which means that we're doing our best to listen. Sometimes we don't listen. Sometimes we can't hear. For instance, I had a dream once where, so this is a hallmark of transmission dreams sometimes, a certain sort of genre of transmission dream. Some being is trying to talk to you and tell you something important, but their sense of time is different than yours. And so what you hear is something spoken extremely fast. It has something to do with the different, basically, cosmic time zones. They're in a different realm time zone. So I've had many of these dreams where someone's just speaking me incredibly fast. And my dream yoga teachers told me about this phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So one night, this is when I was teaching at Northwestern, I had one of these dreams. And I just could not hear. I just couldn't catch what was being told to me. And I said in the dream, please slow down. I can't hear. And then this shaft of light opened up. It was very hooky. Sometimes I'm ironic in my dreams. And these leaves of paper started to fall down through the shaft of light, and they landed on the ground. And I looked at them, and there were pictures drawn on it. And it was kind of like, okay, maybe dial it back. Yeah. And I understood what the pictures were telling me to do. So even if we have trouble hearing what's being spoken, if the effort is sincere, that's what matters. And then, of course, hearing we have to follow. And I like that image of what Baiji says, like putting your hand in the hand of wisdom, like a trusting little child. Because when we get to a certain level of surrender, we understand we don't know what's coming. And then if we're in a situation, the best laid plans gone in an instant. And then if we're in a situation that feels particularly difficult or obstacle laden, then we get even more freaked out about not knowing what's going to happen, because we think, oh, this could be a complete disaster. But what's a disaster if you're following wisdom? There's no such thing. If you were following wisdom and you died as a result, that would be a good death. If you were following wisdom and your house burnt down as a result, that would be a good situation. If you were doing your best, even if it was all a big misunderstanding, it wouldn't matter if you were doing your best to follow. And what is the reward for all of this? Well, it's not, getting to the pearly gates and not being judged. In our culture, of course, we grew up most of us in Abrahamic coalition religions, or at least saturated by them in some way or another, or poisoned, as the case may be. And the thing that we've been most poisoned by isn't the central message of those traditions of peace and love. The thing that we've been poisoned by is punishment and reward, until it structures almost every experience that we have. Fear of punishment and grasping for reward. And the only reward that we get on this path is being able to play more freely while immersed in that divine awareness. And it's not even selves that are doing that. In other words, our sense of self changes so radically that the self you are now is not feeling of self that you will have when you get into a more playful, immersed situation. It'll be, yourself will feel different. So you don't even get the reward of you now being able to do that. Do you understand? And of course, spiritual materialism is looking for certain rewards in your spiritual practice, which could be intangible, like self-image, or some sort of spiritual accomplishments, or tangible, money, power. Many, many, many people are, in this country particularly, are doing something spiritual to become more powerful as they are now, individually. You will be more powerful because you'll be able to work with energy and with space and time. That's more powerful, for sure. But unless you're just going to become some kind of jerk with a lot of power, which I will do my best to not have that happen to anyone I work with, it won't be you exercising that power, and that power will only be for play, because you'll realize very, very deeply that there is no mission, there is no project. So there's fierceness in our life circumstances that helps us to divest of limitation and constraint, and we should welcome it. It's okay to complain about it too, because I want to give myself permission to complain. But alongside whatever feelings of upsetness anybody has when they encounter obstacles or difficulties or burdens, as practitioners, we should fundamentally recognize those things as reward. That we're being taken a little more seriously by wisdom, that we're being told we have more capacity, or that we have some capacity. Same thing when the teacher gets fierce with you. Teachers are not fierce with students who have low capacity. At least if they're skillful, they aren't. I guess I'm saying all this because there's so much attention to how things are hard and how hard things make us feel bad and how we want to be spoken to in a certain way, and we think we should only have certain kinds of obstacles, and things in life just shouldn't be the way they are. They should be some other way that's easier for us. This is all wrong according to this kind of tradition. I feel like the 6 months that we've been here is pretty much the hardest time in my life for decades, for lots of internal reasons. I mean, not really particularly external reasons. I mean, I have money, I'm living in a house, I have food, I'm surrounded by nice students. So there's nothing like that. It's just a lot of internal stuff. But in a way now I'm feeling, why didn't I get hard stuff the last 2 decades? What was wrong? Everything seems so smooth. And I'm, of course, painting things with too broad a brush, but I feel like, okay, I'm on the train, not on the cart. So I guess I just want to say one more thing. I think it's important, again, to just remind yourselves of what this tradition is and what it isn't. It's just not a half measure or a quarter measure of a tradition or a path. So people can take it however they want. Of course, everybody's welcome in teachings. But my central job is to introduce people to the path until they realize it's not actually a path. But in any case, it isn't a half measure. I don't think we should assume that we can't practice in the way that this tradition is meant to be practiced. We shouldn't assume that. I think we should try to work with our fragility and become less fragile. I think we should give it a shot. Right? Do it the way that Abhinavagupta said. Start at the end, not at the beginning. See what we can do. Don't just say from the outset that we can't do it. And of course, many of you are doing it. We should try, or at least I want to. I want to be able to give you what I got, and I want you to be able to have the realization that I have, or more. Otherwise I just wouldn't be doing this. Try to work with whatever life sends you. That's the method of this tradition. Start with the assumption that you might be able to handle something, or you might be able to do something. Don't back off from it before you've tried. Don't be so afraid of failure or discomfort that you back off before you've even started. And this could go in all areas of life. If someone says, well, maybe that store has the exotic food item that you're looking for. Oh, no, I don't think so. I doubt it. That's a very typical response these days. Or something's just too scary or too hard or takes too long or is uncomfortable or seems a little strange or whatever the reason is. Or you're afraid what someone else thinks of the thing that you're being confronted with if you have to work with that thing. These are all so familiar, right? And it all has to do with fear of discomfort and fear of not looking good and fear of failure, fear of not getting what small self wants, all these ordinary fears. So we should start with, yes, I'll try, rather than no. The great secret of success in any realm is being willing to fail.